Big date, January 1st. Of course, it's not just New Year's Day. It's also when some laws go into effect. Even those that are already in place, provisions going into effect, including the SAFETY Act, the Safety, Accountability, Transparency, and Fairness Today Act. And in particular, from the SAFETY Act, a provision in there about cashless bond, no cash bail. And the Pretrial Fairness Act, as they call it. But you've got dozens of states' attorneys and sheriffs all across the state suing to block that from being implemented, and we'll talk more about that now here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk now at 7:41. Anytime you need to get a hold of me, bishoponair@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Just search out Bishop on Air. Now we're going to talk with Wirepoints Matt Rosenberg about some of the local impacts of the SAFETY Act were nothing to change. And Governor J.B. Pritzker last week, he talked about the changes he wants to see implemented in the SAFETY Act. Here's some of what he had to say last week.
So let's amend the act to make it very explicit that violent criminals who are in jail awaiting trial, that January 1 is not some deadline to let people out.
He also talked about misinformation he says Republicans are spreading.
One of the purposes of the SAFETY Act is to keep our neighborhoods safe and make sure that people who are awaiting trial, who are nonviolent, who may have committed low-level offense, aren't just sitting in jail because they don't have a few $100s.
So let's get the reaction from Matt Rosenberg from Wirepoints to Governor J.B. Pritzker, essentially saying that, the SAFETY Act is supposed to keep us safe, but it needs to be changed to ensure that violent criminals don't get out of jail. As he says, Republicans are misinterpreting that. Matt, thanks for taking time with us here on WMAY. Are Republicans and even Democrats, states' attorneys, misinterpreting this?
No, I don't think so. There are a lot of claims going around. I think it's important to read the law and dig into what it really says and doesn't say. I also think it's important to get a preview for the 101 other counties in Illinois that haven't implemented bail reform already and will January 1st under SAFETY. Take a look at Cook County because they implemented bail reform in late 2017 at the direction of Chief Judge Tim Evans. It has not worked out well. Since then, 15,000 times pretrial defendants who were out on low cash or no cash bail committed new crimes. 4.4 thousand times these were either violent crimes, person crimes like assault, battery, or child neglect, or weapons crimes. Again and again, we have repeat convict weapons offenders who get charged with new weapons offenses. They're let out, and then they may go commit additional violent crimes while they're out on low cash or no cash bond. So I'm all for first-time nonviolent offenders not having to pay cash bail. I'm with the governor on that. But the language is another big soundbite, Greg. We can get to that in a minute. But there's a number of things that do need to be fixed, so I'm encouraged to hear him say that.
So we've, of course, got, an interesting window of time, a week and a day before the November 8th election. I highly doubt lawmakers are going to be called back to deal with it before the election. But then lawmakers come back to Springfield, Matt, the week after the election, and they've got several weeks of fall veto session before January 1st. Surely you've seen some of the proponents of the SAFETY Act pushing back on proposed changes. Do you think that resistance to those proposed changes is going to be strong enough to limit the changes that some states' attorneys across the states say are needed, even some going as far as saying that the entire act needs to be repealed? What do you think is the outcome going to be of, whatever happens between the election and January 1st?
I think Democrats saying we'll fix this after the election should be a red flag to everyone. They're going to look at how they do, how many seats they lose or don't in the state House and Senate. They're going to be looking at the margin in the governor's race. And if the incumbent holds the office, they'll be deciding whether they have a wake-up call or not. It's all political, and that's wrong because we're talking about the safety of our communities, but it's also an instruction to voters to make their will heard based on the issues. So we've got a few big things to fix. One is probationable, forcible felonies. Pretrial defendants can be detained only if they have a high likelihood of willful flight. That's one of several big problems. A high likelihood of willful flight means police have to catch a guy in a crate in the back of a truck going to Louisville, or on a plane at O'Hare about to take off for Reykjavik. Also, there's a requirement that there be a threat to a specific identifiable individual to detain pretrial for weapons felonies. It's very hard to prove threat to a specific person in a case like that. A guy with multiple prior convictions for weapons felonies charged with a new one, he's a threat to the community. So they need to change language there. There are other changes as well that are necessary, and I can get into some of that.
We're talking with Matt Rosenberg. He is with Wirepoints, looking at the Safety Act and the pretrial fairness provision that goes into effect January 1st. Matt, we've got a few minutes left here. Unpack some of the other changes you note mightn't be needed. In particular, even some sheriffs have said for months and months and months since this thing originally passed back in January of 2021 that they may have a hard time getting people and arresting them for trespass.
Yes, that's a significant issue. I look closely at the language. There's been a lot of dispute about it, what it does and doesn't say. Right now, the thing that jumps out to me is there's no custodial arrest allowed for Class B or Class C felonies, including trespassing, under the new language, unless the police can ascertain that let's call him the trespasser, is an obvious threat to the community or a person. Well, what the heck does that mean? That he's got a weapon in hand or a burglary kit or an arson kit? State Senator Scott Bennett, as you know, has a bill, SB 4228, that is a very worthwhile bill. Of course, he's a Democrat too, so let's give the party some credit. I hope his bill gets consideration. On trespassing, it proposes a better standard. It says the officer can make a custodial arrest if the officer reasonably believes that's necessary to discontinue the criminal behavior. In plain English, for the homeowner says, hey, this guy's been trespassing on and off for days, officer. So the officer doesn't have to worry about his decision being overruled by a judge later. So that would be an improvement. And there are others still. There's stuff on electric monitoring in the bill that's very alarming. I can tell you a tiny bit about that, too.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because I know Cook County's Sheriff Tom Dart has been quiet to a degree about some of this stuff, but recently just raised some questions about the electronic monitoring that's going to be allowed here. Are prosecutors and counties going to have to rely too much on what could possibly be faulty technology?
Well, it's in Cook County, and I think the sheriff's office has articulated this quite well. It's also been a case there, and obviously our most populous, in some ways, most crime-ridden county. They're overwhelmed. The county board and county president, Tony Preckwinkle, in their budget have not given the Cook County Sheriff's Office enough special officers for their special unit, which is required to monitor the several thousand people on electronic monitoring, and the population has gotten increasingly risky. 3/4 of them now are looking at weapons or violent crime offenses. It used to just be half just a few years ago. That data comes from the chief judge's office. So what safety does that's very concerning, it gives a 48-hour free roaming pass to electric monitoring escapees, guys who go off the reservation by breaking their ankle bracelet or just, disappearing from the radar. They get 48 hours before the police can go get them. That's bad. Then they also get 2 8-hour passes weekly for so-called essential movement. Now, if they're going to a job counselor or a church, that's one thing, but unless it's carefully supervised, that essential movement is risky. In both cases, witnesses and victims are at risk when guys charged with serious crimes are let free from electronic monitoring. So they say they're concerned about public safety. It sure doesn't sound like it when you look at stuff like that or some of the other provisions I've already mentioned.
Matt Rosenberg, if people want to read more about this, surely Wirepoints, you guys have been on top of this and so many other issues. Where can people find that?
At wirepoints.org. And by all means, dial in and sign up for free daily delivery of our emailed news highlights there, wirepoints.org.
And I got to tell you, even as a member of the media, I read 3 newspapers every morning. I'm constantly, keeping my thumb on whatever pulse of the news I can. And that Wirepoints email is so instructive and just the wide scope of all kinds of different issues, from economic issues to education issues to issues of criminal justice. All of that, Wirepoints does an incredible job of ensuring people know the latest headlines. So, Matt Rosenberg, greatly appreciate you taking time with us this morning. I think we're going to be talking about this again in the near future. All right, be safe out there.
Very good, Greg. Thanks very much.
It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on